The wind blew dry between the wooden boards of the small house in Tupelo, Mississippi. It was January 8, 1935. Inside a cramped room, smelling of kerosene and sulfur, Gladys Presley held a baby in her arms, Elvis Aaron Presley. But just minutes earlier, she had given birth to another boy. Jesse Garon, his twin brother, who was stillborn and buried in secret just hours later in an unmarked cemetery. From that day on, sorrow never left that house. Gladys, devastated, began to treat Elvis with absolute devotion. She said God had taken one and left the other for a greater purpose. She was extremely protective, smothering, even, as if she feared fate might steal her second son at any moment. Elvis grew up surrounded by this desperate love, and by a silent grief that never went away. He was a quiet boy. Big, curious eyes, but always a bit sad. Sometimes, he'd isolate himself in the backyard and talk to himself. Once, when he was only 6, he told his mother that his dead brother came to visit him in dreams. Gladys didn't scold him. She just cried, and held him tighter than he could bear. Religion was in the air that family breathed. Every Sunday, Elvis was taken to a small Pentecostal church where worshipers danced, shouted, and went into trances. He listened to sermons about hell and salvation and quietly watched as someone would receive the Spirit and collapse to the floor, trembling. It scared him and fascinated him. But outside the church, the world was harsh. The Presley family lived in poverty. Vernon, the father, was jailed for writing a bad check. Elvis saw his mother work in fields, in factories, anywhere she could earn enough to put food on the table. They moved from house to house, always carrying the same fear, that they might not make it. When they finally moved to Memphis during Elvis's teenage years, the poverty remained. And with it, the feeling of being an outsider. He wore worn-out clothes, was mocked by others, felt out of place. But something about him stood out, his voice. A sweet, raspy voice, full of emotion. When he sang, it seemed to come from another time, another place. At a school talent show, he sang for an audience for the first time. The crowd fell silent. That skinny, shy boy seemed to be channeling something bigger than himself. His eyes sparkled, but it was a strange sparkle, as if he were singing not just to the living, but also to the dead. Maybe, in some way, he was singing to Jesse. Elvis grew up with a void he could never fill. A twin he never knew in life but carried with him like a shadow. An absent father, an obsessive mother, a childhood marked by loss, by voices and visions. Deep down, the future king of rock was just a haunted boy. Haunted by the thought that at any moment, it could all be over. Elvis was still young when he began attracting attention with his voice. Hair slicked back with grease, a shy but piercing gaze, and that bold mix of gospel, blues, and country created something new, something dangerous for the time. It was 1954, and the conservative world of white America didn't know what to make of this poor boy who sang like a black man. It was in this setting that Tom Parker appeared, a man with an unplaceable accent, calculating eyes, and a past shrouded in mystery. No one knew exactly where he came from. Some said he was Dutch, others that he was running from something in Europe. But everyone knew him by his self-appointed title, Colonel. Parker wasn't a colonel of anything. He had never served in the military. He was a master manipulator, and in Elvis, he saw the golden goose he'd been waiting for. He didn't just hear the voice, he saw dollar signs. With sweet talk, promises of fame, and cryptic contracts, he trapped Elvis in a web that would hold him for the rest of his life. Gladys, Elvis's mother, distrusted the smooth-talking man with the stiff smile. But Parker, ever the charmer, quickly won the family's trust. He claimed he would turn Elvis into the biggest star in the world. And in a way, he did. But at what cost? Parker's first decision was clear: total control. Schedules, clothes, interviews, contracts, even Elvis's stage movements. Elvis was marketed as a product, the clean-cut Southern boy, charming and white, but with a musical soul that sounded black. That racial tension, exploited by the Colonel's marketing, helped fuel the phenomenon, but also placed Elvis in the center of a deep identity crisis. Parker banned Elvis from speaking about politics, religion, or anything controversial. The singer often didn't get to choose his own songs. Not even the films he starred in. In exchange for millions in profits, he was subjected to ridiculous scripts and grueling tours, all decided without his input. "I'm a puppet," Elvis once confided to a close friend. "I sing where he tells me to, wear what he tells me to. And at the end of the day, I don't even know who I am anymore." The contract with the Colonel, signed officially, felt like a pact. But in practice, it was an invisible prison. Parker pocketed 50% of everything Elvis earned, an outrageous cut by industry standards. Yet Elvis, loyal to the end, never broke away from him. Maybe out of fear. Maybe emotional dependence. Maybe because, like so many children from difficult childhoods, he desperately needed someone to tell him what to do. During a break in his career, Elvis was sent into the army, a strategic move by Parker to clean up the star's image and distance him from the controversies surrounding him. When he returned, he was no longer the same. The raw, rebellious energy had been tamed. The man who came back was more restrained, more obedient, more hollow. While the Beatles were revolutionizing music and the world outside was changing, Elvis was trapped in a bubble. Silly movies, disposable soundtracks, empty endorsement deals. He was being slowly drained from within, while Parker counted the profits. The world called him the king. But the real throne belonged to another man. A colonel with no uniform, no heart, and pockets that only grew deeper. 4 years, Elvis Presley toured the country endlessly. From city to city, stage after stage, he drove crowds wild. But when the lights went out and the curtains fell, the king of rock returned to the only place where he felt any sense of control: Graceland. The mansion in Memphis was more than his home, it was his castle. But like the old fairy tales, even castles have dungeons. And over time, Elvis turned that palace into his own prison. Graceland was filled with luxury, but everything there reeked of excess and isolation. Heavy curtains, extravagant rugs, rooms with esoteric decor. The phone rang constantly, and the house was never empty, but it was never truly alive either. Around him, a fixed group of friends, nicknamed the Memphis Mafia, orbited his every whim. They flattered him, ran his errands, laughed at his jokes. But no one confronted him. No one said no. At the center of it all was Elvis, now older, bloated, restless, trying to escape from what the world expected him to be. He took pills to sleep, others to wake up, more to eat, not eat, to perform. Doctors came to him like waiters in a luxury restaurant, prescribing whatever was necessary to keep him standing. By day, Graceland felt like a museum of silence. By night, it turned into a labyrinth of shadows and muffled voices. Elvis wandered the halls, often alone, wearing his flashy outfits even without an audience. Sometimes, he'd spend hours at the piano playing gospel hymns, as if searching, through the music that shaped him, for some thread of redemption. There were also outbursts of rage. He threw things, shot out TVs, argued with his bodyguards over trivial matters. But soon he'd return to a lethargic state, drugged, as if nothing had happened. He lived in cycles, of euphoria, exhaustion, and sadness. Graceland became an empty theater, a former employee would later write. And the lead actor no longer knew which role he was playing. Fame, which once fueled him, had become poison. Elvis couldn't go out in public. He couldn't trust anyone. The paranoia grew. He installed cameras all over the mansion, ordered his cars to be checked, his calls monitored. He even claimed, in all seriousness, that the government was after him, and that he would be assassinated for knowing too much. And then there was Priscilla. The marriage was quietly falling apart. Still very young, she could no longer bear that closed-off world, that life orbiting a man who was slowly slipping away. When she finally left him, Elvis fell apart, but didn't fight to win her back. It was as if he had already expected the abandonment. The walls of Graceland, once a symbol of success, began to echo his loneliness. Elvis became a prisoner of his own image. He was no longer a man. He was a myth. And like all myths, he was doomed to vanish in tragedy. The summer of 1977 arrived scorching in Memphis. Inside Graceland, the windows were always shut, heavy curtains blocking out the light. The air conditioner hummed day and night, trying to cool the body of a man who was already burning up, both inside and out. At 42 years old, Elvis Presley looked like he had aged 2 decades in just 5 years. Bloated, pale-skinned, with lifeless eyes, he could barely climb a flight of stairs without losing his breath. Away from the stage for increasingly longer periods, he now lived in a broken routine of pills, delusions, and failed attempts to become the man he once was. The world still applauded him. But he no longer heard the cheers. He was locked inside his mind, reliving memories, chasing ghosts, talking to the past as if it were the present. He claimed he could hear Jesse, his stillborn twin brother, in the quietest hours of the night. "When I die, I want to go find him. I want to see if he still recognizes me," he reportedly told one of his bodyguards just weeks before the end. In the early morning hours of August 16th, Elvis stayed up late. He read the Bible, took his usual pills, and around 9 a.m., he was found unconscious on the bathroom floor. His fiancée at the time, Ginger Alden, walked in and saw his lifeless body, face down, his head turned to the side. It was already too late. The news spread across the globe within minutes. Thousands of fans wept in the streets, camping outside Graceland. TV networks interrupted their programming. The king of rock was dead. But what really killed Elvis? Officially, his heart. A sudden heart attack. But the reports, the fine print, and the whispered truths revealed a breakdown years in the making. Over 10,000 doses of prescription medication had been given to him in his final months. A life slowly destroyed, with the complicity of doctors, managers, and a system that preferred to keep him sedated rather than confront his pain. Colonel Tom Parker showed up at the funeral, stone-faced, dressed as if attending a show, with his white hat and cigar in his mouth. While Elvis's body was still lying in state, Parker was already negotiating rights to his image, as if death were just another profitable stage in their invisible contract. Graceland, a few years later, would be turned into a museum. Millions would walk through its halls trying to connect with the legend. But those who knew the man, the real Elvis, understood that behind the gold, the fame, and the throne, there was someone who never wanted to be king. He just wanted to be heard and loved. Fame destroyed Elvis the same way it created him, one critic wrote. He was a reflection of what America wanted, and also of what it consumes. Elvis died in silence. But the cry of his tragedy still echoes today. Not as a final note, but as a warning. Too much light can blind even the star itself. Decades have passed, but the shadow of Elvis still walks the halls of Graceland. Fans swear they hear his voice. Others say they feel his presence, sitting at the piano or wandering in the night. Maybe, in some way, he's still there. Not as the icon, but as the boy who once sang with ghosts, and became one.